Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And welcome to this session entitled Linking Youth Programs into NSF's Broader Impacts for Research, Learning, and Access. I'm very pleased to have with us as our presenter today, Laurie Van Egeren, who is Michigan State University's Assistant Provost for University Community Partnerships in the Office of University Outreach and Engagement. She is an adjunct faculty member in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies, and recently served as acting director of the Michigan State University Museum. Dr. Van Egeren conducts engaged research funded by the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, state government, and foundations, including state evaluations of after-school programs, and is a child care consultant as well. We're very pleased to have her with us to share some information about broader impact. This is something that is of critical importance to those of us in higher education when we seek funding from federal government sources. So without further ado, Dr. Van Egeren.
Thank you. All right, so let me know if I'm not loud enough, since you're all spread really far back, but that's okay. I'm a back table sitter myself. So I'm going to talk to you about broader impacts, and I want to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, because it's always helpful, I think, to know what is the experience and perspectives that somebody would be bringing you this information from. So obviously I'm from Michigan State. I'm in our Office of Outreach and Engagement. We work in partnerships, but a lot of what I do is work with faculty trying to identify ways that they can use their research as scholarly engagement. I also am an evaluator for the Michigan 21st Century Learning Community Centers, Michigan 21st Century Community Learning Centers. We've been doing this since 2003, evaluated 400,000 kids so far in that time, working in hundreds and hundreds of youth programs around the state. And we have one of the kind of model evaluation systems for that program, and a great partnership with Michigan Department of Ed and Weichert Center, if you've ever worked at the Weichert Center for Youth Program Quality. So we think about those kinds of issues in terms of K-12. I'm on the steering committee of the National Alliance for Broader Impacts. I came into this group, and this is an NSF-funded group who have been funded for 5 years, I think we're in year 4, to help identify resources and help universities and others think about how to develop partnerships and opportunities for faculty to work in broader impacts, which we'll talk more about. So that's been a great group, and I came into it because I come out of outreach and engagement. Our office, it tends to be very social science focused, and I knew that we were not getting the faculty and the staff and graduate students who worked in the STEM fields. And I thought, this is actually the same thing, it's just different language. So I've been trying to make that bridge, and I'm kind of this sole social science person on this STEM group, and they're just fantastic, and they're great, and I'll talk a little bit about them. And then I come out as a parent, because I also have had children who have gone through lots of youth programs in the university and out of the university. So at Michigan State, we have a Spartan Youth Programs directory that you can search to find programs that are in the university, which is very helpful for parents, as well as for people who are looking for partners. But then we've also done lots of programs outside of the university, my kids have. And now they're in college, own youth programs, which is great. One of them is in teacher education. And with all the, I have mixed feelings, but I hope she does really great. And we've worked with Neutral Zone here in Ann Arbor before as well, if you're from the local area. So this talk is entitled Linking Youth Programs into NSF's Broader Impacts, and the key here is, what is broader impacts? So at first I want to get a sense of the room. How many of you here are programming people, really work in developing and implementing programs for youth? Okay. How many people are faculty? Faculty or staff within a university? Okay. How many of you have worked and thought about broader impacts as a term? So for some of you, this is a little bit more new, and some of you have experience with it. Okay. We always want money, right? We're always looking for money and opportunities to continue our programs, to be able to serve youth. We also, as faculty, want to be able to get money and do our research and support our missions within our universities. So NSF, in its wisdom, this has occurred over a multiplicity of years, but has really been gearing up over the last, say, decade, noted that there is a need for accountability of the funding that goes into research. So NSF particularly funds a lot of basic research, and basic research can be quite hard to explain to the legislatures who fund that and want to be able to know what their money is buying, right? So we have that. So France Cordova, who's currently director of NSF, said, as a federal agency, we need to stay relevant to those who entrust us with our taxpayer funds. We need to be able to explain to Congress what we're doing with those funds. And Lamar Smith, who is the chairman of the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, said each grant application must be relevant to the national interest. So we have this point where we have research, some of it is basic research, some of it is applied research or a mix, but there needs to be a piece of it that also is able to explain to the larger public about what that is for. So broader impact specifically is the societal benefits of research. That is what it is meant to be. Now these all happen to be programs, but there are lots of ways to think about broader impacts. We're going to go through them. Programs may be the most relevant for this group. And I want to say, I know that the theme of the conference is college access. I'm not going to speak specifically to college access because that's programming and that's for the people who are experts on college access. So this is more about what can you do to be able to support those college access frameworks within an NSF or other perspective, because NSF isn't the only one, as I'll show you. And what we're really getting on is, they would love to be able to have return on investment. Now, we can almost never provide actual return on investment data. It's extremely difficult. But that's the idea behind broader impacts in some ways. Of course, everybody wants to do good. Faculty want to make a difference, staff want to make a difference, people want to make a difference, but we also need to be able to do that within the context of the funding situations that we have. So we're going to specifically sort of focus on NSF, but broader impacts is not just NSF, although that is specifically NSF terminology. So I would say right now there are lots of ways to talk about this work. We can call it outreach and engagement, we can call it broader impacts, we can call it public humanities, we can call it collective impact, we can call it all kinds of things. We're still talking about the societal benefits of research that often, not always, but often will come through partnerships in the communities. Okay? So I'm going to use broader impacts terminology here, but I do not think that this is the only way to talk about this. We're talking about all those engaged scholarship kind of areas. So outside of NSF, NIH sometimes has RFPs and RFAs that will require an outreach and engagement component. NIH of course, tends to be more applied, although there is basic research that goes on. But I did a grant review session a few years ago at National Institutes for Health that was specifically about partnerships. And I did one at the U.S. Department of Ed that was specifically about community partnerships and partnering with state or local schools. So there are these opportunities out there to get funding. USAID has parts that are focused on outreach and education and engagement. And then foundations, of course, depending on what their mission is, may have really great opportunities. Indirects tend to be smaller. If you're working in the university system and you know that overheads is part of it, foundations may not support that in the same way that a federal funding agency will, but they can be great places to be able to get funding for the kinds of programs or the kinds of work that you want to do. So I just wanted to mention that we have these other opportunities. Now, back to NSF. So why does this concept of broader impacts matter? So if you're a programming person, one of the goals out of this session would probably be, if you're a program person and haven't worked with faculty a lot, or maybe are looking to get more partnerships, it's what are the things that faculty are looking at as they're trying to get funding that can be beneficial to all of you, right? And how can you contribute to those proposals in a equitable way. So we know that NSF has an annual budget about $7 billion. They get 44,000 proposals a year. They fund 11,000. That's actually misleading because when you're in a review session, there might be 40, 50 proposals, and they will pick out 2 to even move forward and be further considered. So I don't know where the other 25% is going, but in the panels that I've been part of, this has been much more competitive even than this. So it really depends. And Congress requires that all NSF proposals are reviewed on intellectual merit and broader impacts. And when this developed, this was really a novel idea. And if you look at grants and RFAs, they'll have lots of criteria that need to be assessed. For NSF, there's 2. That's all there are. The intellectual merit, which is the science, and then the broader impacts, which is the societal benefit. So investigators who are applying for NSF funds really have only 2 criteria that they need to meet, and it is imperative that they address broader impacts. However, this has been done in varying degrees of success and rigor over the years, and I will tell you that having met with NSF around these things, it is getting more and more important. There's more and more consensus that these broader impacts need to be well addressed. So at one point it was like, well, really it's the science that's most important, and the science is unbelievably important. But broader impacts was kind of an add-on. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this work, and then I'm going to have like a paragraph, and it's going to say I'm going to go and I'm going to do a talk. Or I'm going to do a K-12 program, but not very specific, no partners lined up, not anything that would be feasible, nothing in the budget to dedicate to it, right? So no evaluation. This is changing. It's changing more in some directorates than others, but it's changing. So I wouldn't say that they're equally weighed in funding decisions, but broader impacts is increasingly important. And why does it matter? I mean, we talked a little bit about it. That was the cynical view, was that Congress wants to see accountability and return on investment. And accountability is a good thing. But one of the things is that it's helping researchers think more deeply about the relevance and the implications of their work. And the best BI, I think there's a slide later, that the best broader impacts work is really an integrated part of a faculty member's program of research and their scholarly work. So just as they have a program of research that should be building and it should be integrated across multiple areas, hopefully interdisciplinary from my perspective, so should the broader impacts be. And so one of the things that folks who are at this conference in particular can do is to try to build those long-standing partnerships and figure out how to work together to be able to work with faculty so that they're able to develop that as part of their scholarly legacy, right? They should have a scholarly legacy that is around what the societal impact of their work is as well. It's also reinforcing and strengthening communication skills. We see so much more now than even 5 years ago of workshops around science communication, of pleas to scientists to learn how to put their work out into the public vision and explain it in a way that people can understand. That's a place where people at this conference can really help with faculty, because there are a few faculty who can be succinct and accessible, but it's really hard because they've been trained all their life to be very detailed and specific and not overcommit what they're saying. And so there's a lot of this kind of work going on, communication skills, and it's in all kind of areas. It's in areas of how do you make slides and graphs that are really readable and engaging, which I'm not really doing in this presentation, but theoretically I know how. And there are things about being able to write good public opinion pieces and contact your legislatures and be advocates. And then there are pieces just about how to go out and do a TED Talk kind of thing, right, which would be really engaging. So there's all kinds of exciting things in this area. There's also a lot of the work that comes out of broader impacts projects and programs is around exciting the next generation of scientists and engineers, particularly in diverse fields. We know that there is insufficient diversity in STEM, or really in anything, and and this is one of the ways that NSF is at least attempting to try to address it, is through this broader impacts. So often, if an investigator is writing a broader impacts plan, they may build in pieces that are specifically around recruiting and providing opportunities for students. They could be high school students even, to come into their labs from places that may not have those opportunities very often, to try to increase women, try to increase people of color, and so forth. All right, whoops, wrong way. Please interrupt me if you have any questions or comments or examples. Okay, we don't have too many people here to not be able to have a conversation. So as I say, the best broader impacts plans are just seamlessly integrated into the research. How do you do that? You do it in the same way that you are building your research. A faculty member will start out with one project, one grant, build that up over time. If you can have that BI piece that's part of it, maybe it's working with a particular partner in the schools or in your university's pre-college programs, and having that continue to grow over time. So these are some of the suggested areas of BI. Now, NSF is very much doesn't ever want to be prescriptive, and that's part of the reason there isn't specific criteria and agreement about what is good broader impacts or even what is good intellectual merit. What is, they don't want to prescribe the science. They want innovation. Okay? But these are some of the areas that have come up over time that might be possible opportunities for broader impacts. So we might have participation of women, persons with disabilities, and underrepresented minorities. So that might be a piece that you're developing the program to address the pipeline in these particular underrepresented groups. Another is STEM education and educator development. Okay? And these are probably, these would be the top two that get addressed. These are the most common approaches that investigators and partners will take to try to address broader impacts. It might be increased public scientific literacy, public engagement. There might be a citizen science project. It might be a citizen science project that you can double up with a youth program. Right? It might be public talks, for example. But you have to think about, how do I make this innovative and really meet some goals, as opposed to I'm going to go to my library and I'm going to speak to two people who happen to be there at noon on a Monday. Right? Improved well-being of individuals in society. The development of a diverse and globally competitive STEM workforce. So that actually, in some ways, gets here and above. Increased partnerships between academia, industry, and others. National security, that's not one that I have very much familiar with. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'm sure there are people who do. It's probably not as relevant to the pre-college conference. Increased economic competitiveness and infrastructure for research and education. That one's probably also less relevant. But there are many here that can be relevant to programs, to your programs. One of the things that they really want is innovation, but there's a debate. So does the research need to be innovative and the broader impacts plan need to be innovative? We don't know. It helps. It would be great. It would be helpful if it were. But there's also a movement to saying, well, that's kind of asking too much. So it always depends on the review committee you get. There's always issues, not issues, but it just always, when I would go and review grants for the Discovery Research K-12 program at NSF, and I would just have the most interesting panels, because these were all applied, educational, some sort of form of education or discovery, lots of museum work, lots of youth programs, school programs. And for example, I had, there were some qualitative researchers, quantitative researchers. I was predominantly on the quantitative research evaluation side and early childhood side, and then we had an astronaut who didn't know anything about sort of applied regular programs, but brought an outside interesting perspective, and then people from nonprofits. So, but a different review panel is going to be completely different makeup. So, just like anything, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. So let's talk about, if you're doing a grant proposal, what are some of the things to be aware of in the broader impacts area? Now, this is just a basic, these are the parts of a proposal. Now, for the broader impacts section, and there's the Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide from National Science Foundation, but you will have a section, or the investigator will have a section about the intellectual merit and the background and the preliminary research and so forth. And there can be a section that is specifically the broader impacts of the proposed work. You could also integrate it all the way through, but regardless, you want to have a highlighted piece that says, here is the broader impacts. I remember when I started doing grant proposals initially, and I didn't like the way that they would set up the questions, and so I'd put it into an order that made sense. And as a reviewer later, I was like, oh, that's so annoying because you have to go hunt and peck. So, broader impacts, clearly labeled. Now, my work, I had an NSF grant that's just ended, and it was a 5-year grant on early childhood and preschool STEM. And so we worked with teachers all across Michigan and then collected data on about 500 preschoolers. The broader impacts of that was really embedded all throughout because that work was the broader impact, but it was still good to explicate these are the impacts. This number of teachers will get trained, we'll get professional development, it's developing the workforce, although I'm kind of cautionary about that because that pipeline, that work needs to continue or it dies, right? I'm not going to be able to do things in preschool and then have it continue if they don't continue to get those supports. So we have this, and then now it used to be that you would have letters of collaboration, and I used to use that to really fill out what that partnership was like to be able to make it feasible. They've changed that. I think it's just a letter you sign off on, or you don't need them at all. I don't think that's a good thing for an investigator because it doesn't force them to go make sure that those are in place, but that is the case. Oh, this is so wordy. So it's just like writing any kind of grant proposal around the broader impacts piece. So it's kind of a sub-proposal often because it's often quite different from the other work that's being done. If you're doing chemistry or bench science, this is going to be like a little mini proposal within your grant proposal. Okay? So it needs to have the clear activities, and it needs to have the rationale about why this is the thing you're doing. Which of those 9 or 10 or whatever other areas you think of is this fulfilling? Because what NSF would really like to be able to get out of one of these, out of all of these, is to be able at the end to have a nice description to say, all right, this was the societal impact of this work. We would like to be able to go talk to our legislators and talk to our public about it. Okay? It should have a basis in established approaches or be something really brand new, but being able to justify that and really be feasible and a plan for evaluation. So it really is like a little mini proposal, right, in the other proposal, right? And you don't have a lot of space, so you have to be very, very succinct about it. And that's where a place where a good grant writer and an experienced person who's in the community or works with or in pre-college programs can be essential. When I review, go ahead. I was going to say, when I review proposals, I actually think sometimes the direction would go in a different way because whether it was the science or the broader impacts, I'm looking for feasibility because I'm a program evaluator and I'm looking at all those budgetary issues and saying, well, they don't have anybody assigned to this. They don't have any partners or any real way to do this. So it's being complete about that. Yes. Yes, so that's what I mean. It makes it more social sciences, which makes it easier. If you're a bench scientist, I think that's where you really want to work with your partners to be able to figure out how do we do this? How do we state this? What would be interesting and what would be meaningful? And what can we build on and make going forward in the future? And it may not be the exact thing that I'm studying in my research because that might not translate over, right? And that's the challenge, and that's one of the places where NSF is not clear because they don't have an answer and they don't want to be prescriptive. They want to see what investigators come up with. So as I'm saying, you want to approach it in the same way as the research. You're finding the right fit. And so here's where we get into the partnership piece. So I go to at MSU, I go to our new faculty orientation resource fair, and I stand there, and I have 10 to 15 faculty coming into engineering and natural science who say, I want to run a K-12 program. And I think, I know why you want to do that. Because you are a new faculty, you know you're going to need this. It's not against them, but they've got lots of other things to think about at that moment. I know that they've been, understand that they need to be able to do something to be able to move forward in their grant proposals. And K-12 programs is the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. Now, some institutions have some help with that. Michigan State doesn't. You have to kind of go out and make your partnerships individually. And how is that for other, like Zach? We'd have to go out and say, go to Zach and say, what have you got? What could we do that would be innovative and interesting, or at least build onto the infrastructure that you already have, right? And what is it like for your other universities or the other folks that you're working with? Do you have like a specific K-12 office that is working in partnerships and has opportunities for you to build on?
Yeah, so I'm at Michigan Tech, and we have faculty members approach us occasionally basically saying the same thing. I need to do outreach, and so I need to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what do you want to do? You know, it's kind of the same thing. You can sense that they're going after a proposal. But one of our faculty is here, and she presented earlier today about this. We ran a summer camp, and her grant covered the curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And they taught all the stuff. And then we had another one who we facilitated an event and used our connections in the schools to bring kids in, but again they provided the content.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right, so that's one model that I've seen in different places. We don't have it ourselves, unless you know of one, where you might have an office that has a kind of continuing camps, or they have an after-school program. Faculty can develop the content, but they're turning it over to experts to be able to figure out how to implement and run. Which is a really great model if you've got it, but most places probably don't. Does anybody else have a model of how these kinds of programs can be implemented for faculty or through faculty partnerships? Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. So some of this is giving ideas to think about as you're working in your universities or you're partnering with universities, what kinds of infrastructures might be able to be considered moving forward in those institutions that can support faculty in implementing these kinds of things. Of course, anticipate reviewer objections. You'd always do that in a grant proposal. And be programmatic. You don't want to just have a list and a checkoff list. So partnering. How many of you are in university community partnerships? Not in an office, but do them. Engage in them. Okay. When going into this kind of a partnership and building this kind of an infrastructure for the faculty's work or your own work, you want to think about what different ways can this be done. So this might be directly part of the faculty research. It might not be that faculty member's research who's doing it. It might be another faculty member's research. So we have great partnerships that I know of, and there are examples of people who are, for example, plant biologists, but they're partnering with somebody in teacher education who wants to learn about pedagogy of STEM education. Okay? So they're partnering together. Both faculty members are getting publications around that work, but the plant biologist might be the second author, and that's just fine. Or it might be opportunities for graduate students to get in there. But it's leading to a body of work over a long-term partnership that's beneficial and interdisciplinary, right? But where the faculty member who is in plant biology, for example, doesn't have to try and learn a completely new discipline and publish in that area. Because that's the goal, right? We want to make this the sum greater than the parts, not more things for people to do, because they're already very, very busy and overloaded. It might be a faculty research supplement. Like it might be the faculty research, as I was talking about, might be, for example, around chemistry, and we're going to add this other piece that is accompanying it, but isn't necessarily exactly about the same topic. Although what's best is if you could somehow swing it. Who's got a topic that's in STEM? Like what's a topic that wouldn't necessarily be really accessible to the public or to kids? Anybody got one that they're working on, for example? Nuclear science. Yes, nuclear science. So you can't explain particle physics probably to the kids, but you can give them a better idea about what a cyclotron is, what it does. You can even get into the economic aspects if you're working with a classroom about how is this changing our community, because now we have these different jobs and we're bringing in these different folks. Like there's lots of pieces around it that you can partner with faculty around, or with the program. Okay. It could be really around broadening participation and/or around broadening participation. So you want to build your STEM pipeline. I work with the Detroit area pre-college engineering program, who are also presenting this afternoon, I believe. And their mission, they're in Detroit, and they've been going for, I don't know, 30 years, 20, 30 years. And their mission, they are a program in the community, but their mission is to build the pool of students who want to go into the STEM fields. And everybody, all the students are Black, especially they have programs for Black boys, Black young women, goes from K to 12, and they have had multiple rounds of NSF funding. Okay, so they're their own grants. They are not university community partnerships in the same way where the university is the fiduciary. They are receiving these grants themselves and then partnering with universities to provide the programming around renewable energy, for example. And then they might be also partnering with another organization to be able to bring in mentoring, so that these students are being more prepared for college access. And then the outreach and engagement mission. So there are many, many faculty who are very, very committed to the outreach and engagement mission of their work. But they also need to be able to do it in a way that is fairly efficient. Okay, so again, that's where working with existing infrastructure and pre-college programs can be very helpful. Are there other things that you think of that come to your mind around what are the key ways that youth programs would be coming into fulfilling this broader impacts criteria? And one of the things, we have a graduate certification in community engagement at Michigan State, and I teach the one, we all teach different aspects of it. I teach the one on initiating partnerships. And really the big message out of that is you have to think about what everybody needs to get out of this partnership. I know that I had really screwed up partnerships at the beginning when I started doing them because I came out of research and I didn't think about these kinds of issues. So if you're working with a university or you're working with a pre-college program, these are some of the things that you really want to be thinking about for that to move forward successfully. And you may already know this, but I will reiterate, the budget, some of that money needs to go to the program. Okay? There needs to be money in the budget, the listed budget, to go to the program for their staff time or for evaluation or for whatever it is. We need to be able to treat our community partners and the programs or the university programs that we're working with in a way that is valuing and displaying that their time is valuable and that we understand that they too are looking for things out of this partnership, and one of those is sustainability. Right? Especially if they're developing a new curriculum or working with you around that, you want to be able to have some money for them in the budget. You also want to think about the responsibilities and expectations. So I know that with faculty who are working in community programs for the first time, they often are not yet thinking about how do we lay out the responsibilities and expectations. The first time I went out and did a program, I assumed, well, they're going to get the data. They're going to want to enter the data. Of course, I can just assume that the community partners are going to enter the data. They set me straight really quickly. They're not going to enter the data, especially if I'm not paying them, right? So thinking about, what are all those responsibilities, and laying this out in an agreement. Having some sort of an agreement, that can shift. It can be revisited in a living document to come back to, but laying out who's going to do what, What is the timeline? Who is responsible? Who's the point person? What are we expecting to get out of it? What are the public products that the partner should be getting out of it? Or is there data that they need to be able to support their program and give reports to their own funders, right? So there's a whole lot of things that are in this responsibility and this expectations piece. And if you're working with faculty, or you are a faculty, or you're a pre-college programming person, you should look online, look up what some agreements look like, and bring that out. And that should be that can be the discussion point that you have these conversations around. One of the very common things is you have a faculty member or a proposal, and this is true in every proposal. You get it all written. It's due tomorrow. Oh, I need a broader impacts piece, or I need an evaluation, right? Who can I get that? Can you write that for me and stick that in there? That's probably not a very feasible way to end up with your program or your broader impacts, right? Because there's going to be surprises once you get going, for sure. And also really realizing that the partners have so much knowledge. I would not, as a faculty member, be able to say that anything is feasible in the population or the group or the school that I'm working with. Only the partners can tell you, this is a feasible way to do this. This is how you're going to be able to recruit students for your program, or be able to get teachers who can provide it, or be able to make that content work. And especially these days, schools have become more and more aware that they need to have a strategic plan for their students that is meeting the needs of workforce development, for example. And more, they need those out-of-school time programs or pre-college programs to fit into those. So some of our school districts will not necessarily agree that faculty can run a K-12 program in their, some sort of a program in their schools, unless it's meeting the needs of that particular school. And we have to talk not just to the teachers, but to the administration about that, to make sure that it's all good. Is this your experience? Am I for those of you who have done this work? Yeah. Teachers can be very, very enthusiastic about things, but they really, it's very helpful. There's nothing that takes the place of having the administration on board and supporting you. So, and really just thinking throughout about who needs what. So what do the faculty members need to get out of this project? They need to be able to have a grant proposal. They need to be able to get publications. They need to be able to get funding. They need to be able to get tenure and promotions. And they also need to, depending on their institution, some need to fulfill that engagement mission more than others, or they need to fulfill the teaching mission more than others. It depends on your university. And as I say, as I list this, I'm being quite cynical in terms of what do you specifically, instrumentally need to get out of it. Faculty want to do good, but they need to get these other things. What do programs need to get? They need to get funding, sustainability, innovative programs, students to come in. What else? What else do programs need? Good content, yeah. They want to have up-to-date content.
They want to be achieving their mission.
They want to achieve their mission, that's right. And they also like it's prestigious to work with a university, right? If you're in a community, that's something that you can use as a selling point. And they need data, right? If you can provide them with data that they can then use, and they need products that people can understand. Which again, gets back to the science communication and capacity building around that. But that's a partnership thing. You don't have to just if you're a faculty member, you don't have to just do that. You work together and you respect what the partner says about what makes sense to the community, what's going to make a difference, what should that look like, what should that be about. So this actually gets to the sort of that little mini proposal that you're doing, but you're just describing these things. What do you want to do? What do you want to do it? How are you going to do it? How are you going to know if you've done it? And what good is it going to do? That's really what a broader impact section is. And it feels very nebulous to faculty. It's not well defined, and it's not well defined deliberately, which is frustrating because it's ambiguous. It's hard to know if you're doing it right? So it's like anything as well. Any grant proposal, you would like to have multiple people review it, take a look at it. Some places have a community board or a community advisory group that you could put that out to them and say, how does this look? You know, how does this broader impact section look? Does it seem feasible? Do you have suggestions? Of course, this always, you know, means that you have to get things done ahead of time, but it can be invaluable, just as one would do for their science. Evaluation. Who feels comfortable with evaluation? Yeah, evaluation is always challenging. We have a lot of resources in Michigan. There's a Michigan Association for Evaluation. And if you have projects or you have opportunities, you can write to them and potentially post an idea. Now, I can't guarantee somebody will be able to respond, but they may. They may say, this is something that I want to look into. I'd really like to partner with you on that grant. Your institution, your university may have evaluators, or again, to me, the best idea is when you have a faculty member in teacher education or one of the other areas that might be able to partner with you and provide that as part of their own research. Extension is another one. So extension offices will sometimes, at MSU we have extension and they have evaluation, but you know, there are extension people in every county or representing every county. And taking advantage of their knowledge, their community-based knowledge, is really a great, because they already have those community connections. So they're great. Relate to your goals and objectives, budgeted. You might, yeah, if you have, sometimes you can't budget enough for an external evaluator. So maybe you need to go get some consultation about how to evaluate your broader impacts, okay? Again, for me, my broader impacts is the same as evaluating the research. It's about the outcomes for children and teachers. But for example, I did an NSF evaluation with a faculty member who was she was an astronomer. And she was trying out a new way to have students look at, classify galaxies, is what it was. So she'd have all these cards and classify galaxies, and they had to kind of, by induction, put them together, as opposed to somebody saying, this is this kind of a galaxy, and this is this kind of a galaxy. And we just, you know, we evaluated that. And it's not hard. It's saying, well, what do you expect students to be able to get out of that? We don't necessarily expect them to go become astronomers. That's too big, right? What would we like them to be able to do? We'd like them to be able to classify galaxies afterwards, and maybe be able to think that was kind of cool. Maybe be interested in doing something with astronomy again. Maybe I'm looking at college access with a particular program, and I want to build in, did they come to MSU, or did they go to any college at all? And there are tools to be able to do that if you collect the right data. There are databases. So evaluation is just figuring out what's a reasonable expectation out of what should happen here, and how do I figure out whether that happened or not.
On the astronomy example, what was her research, or the researcher's actual research?
I can't even tell you. It was something very astronomy related. So that was an example of where she, you know, it didn't really translate, but she found out a cool way to think about, well, what can we do to teach people, I mean, I think it had to do with galaxies, but to teach people about galaxies at a very accessible level.
It didn't have to have a direct...
It did not have to, it doesn't, so that's, I was saying, I think it's an unreasonable expectation to think that it can always have a direct link to the exact research. Now, if you can, I think that's probably a benefit. So, but we did a pretty distal link there. It's like, oh, all of nuclear physics. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what we could introduce students to around nuclear physics. That seems like a reasonable thing. Nuclear physics is not just on everybody's, at the tip of their tongues and fingers and understanding, right? So it is a move forward in society for people to understand, for example, what these I don't understand, I need to come over and do the tour, what these machines do, right? No. I mean, it could be around what are the careers? So I know people who work over at the cyclotron, and some are particle physicists and are other kinds of people, and some of them go into these kinds of jobs, some of them are in academic jobs, some of them are probably running the K-12 outreach programs at a place like that, because we're seeing more and more graduate students coming out with their masters or their doctorates wanting to do public engagement and be able to do this kind of science communication young people. And some of them are like working in medical fields, doing things with particle physicists around medical equipment that I don't understand, but it's because I didn't do their program. So there are things like that, you know, where you're introducing kind of the plethora of opportunities for students around STEM. That's a benefit. So the key is there's no magic number on evaluation. People would like 10% or $2,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is. It's just going to depend on what the resources are. But budget something or have the capacity on your team to be able to look at that. You might not have money budgeted, but you are saying, okay, well, we've got that expertise. We've got somebody here who's got that expertise. So I want to give you a few resources for future interest in pursuing NSF grants and thinking about broader impacts. Some institutions have BI support offices. These are becoming a little bit more common. Sometimes those are the same as an outreach and engagement office, but you have some people who really do understand K-12 STEM kinds of programming. Or you may have an outreach and engagement office who has some of those partnerships, and they may have a formal kind of K-12 programming model that you can build into. They may just have connections with the schools or with, you know, Gear Up or, you know, the different programs around the university. MSU Extension, because it's MSU. But Extension folks, Extension runs 4-H, and 4-H is a great laboratory for programming, for K-12 programming, and they have great expertise in youth, and they're all over. So I know around East Lansing, the school districts right around us are overstudied and oversought, right? So think about, you know, one of the underrepresented groups is rural populations. We have plenty of rural populations. Let's think about how to get connected out there. You've got a group of people who are already working in those contexts. Let's think about that. Sometimes your Office of Research Support, sponsored research, grants, contracts and grants, they might have people who have expertise in broader impacts. I think at MSU we have one person that's their specialty, for example. But it really depends. You might have a Center for STEM Learning and Research at one of the institutions, at your institution or an institution near you. Or a Center for Teaching and Learning, Faculty Excellence. And museums. So museums are a great place to be able to try out, maybe it's an exhibition, maybe it's some sort of programming that they're going to do, it might be a summer camp. There's a lot of innovative work coming out of museums that goes through NSF. Oh, and local TV stations. Maybe not local TV like this, but WKAR is the PBS station for MSU. And we're working with them so that they can develop videos because they have the expertise in broadcasting and develop in production, video production, to be able to make little vignettes that can be for broadcast for teachers or for parents, or they can be online as well. So it just really depends what kinds of innovative connections that you might have. Now, if you're writing a proposal, this might be a helpful website here. It's at COSI. It's called, and you can just search on Broader Impact Wizard, and it basically is a document. It takes you through each question that you might want to address in a broader impact section. You fill it out, and in a field, goes on to the next one. You fill out the field. At the end, it spits you out a plan, and then you can edit it. I mean, it's the same thing as going through and doing that yourself, but it kind of feels cool because you're doing a wizard online and it's asking you the questions. So you have to create, I think you have to create a guest account, but there's also a video here that introduces you to it. So it's a handy little tool that NSF sponsored. They focus on ocean science, but you can use it for anything. So Broader Impact Wizard. National Alliance for Broader Impacts. Broader Impacts Guiding Principles and Questions. So this is a little guidebook. And this is very long. Just look up Broader Impacts or NABI, and you can get to this link. And it lays out in a pretty easy but comprehensive manner many of the things to think about as you're doing broader impacts development. Lots of the questions, things to consider. These are the principles and questions that NSF approved. okay, which was a struggle because they didn't want to be prescriptive, right? But so this was something that really went through a lot of process of thinking about and was developed with NABI. So that's a great little resource. If you just want to be involved in NABI, they have a listserv that you can sign up for, and a lot of the time, like, programs will come through, job opportunities that graduate students might be able to take advantage of, questions. If somebody's doing a proposal, they might say, hey, does anybody know, about recruiting in this particular context, or has anybody got measures in this particular area? So you can throw out questions through this listserv, and they have a Facebook, and then they also have a Twitter. And they have an annual summit. So the next one is in Providence, and it'll be in March, I think. I should put the date. It's a great group. So it's people, there are faculty there, but there are a lot of people who do grant development around broader impacts and a lot of programming people. And they are entertaining and just a really warm group of people. There's about 150 people who come each to it, so it's a nice size conference. 150 or 300, but a nice size conference. And I really recommend it if you want to go and be around like-minded people who are doing broader impacts in proposal development. They have good sessions. You can submit to present there as well. I think that's what I've got. So